Welcome to the Struggle Series podcast with your host, Anthony Corelli.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Struggle Series podcast. I am your host, Anthony, and I hope you had a very Merry Christmas. And at listening to this, I hope you're having a Happy New Year, as this will be released on New Year's Day. We record a little early, but Happy New Year. So I wanted to kind of catch you up on what's going on in case you've just stumbled upon this podcast, because we're very all over the place here, very chaotic. This podcast was originally designed to be kind of an audiobook series of the books in my saga entitled The Struggle Series. So we recorded it in sort of an audiobook format even before it's out in actual book or paperback format. So those books are entitled The Struggle, The Sacrifice, The Return, and The Cabal. So we hope you've enjoyed listening to those. If you haven't, you can go all the way back to the beginning and start there. And we also spattered some scary stories in between the writings and such, and kind of some true paranormal stuff there. We also merged the other podcast, The Deliverance Project, into this. And so some of our listeners have merged from there as well. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons for that I won't get into today, but most of it is time and energy that it takes to put one of these out. So we decided to focus here. And so after the Saga 4 Cabal came out, we decided that until I kind of have my next novel in the works and kind of get all the ideas solidified, what we would do is move into a short story season in this podcast. And so if you're looking right now, you're seeing this is season 1, episode 3, but there's actually quite a bit of content before that. And that's kind of why that exists. So thank you for dealing with the chaos that is my mind and just sticking with us as we kind of get through this. Now, this format of short stories has a purpose, or it has a meaning. And what we're doing is in these short stories, we're weaving in some concepts or maybe even some theology on the demonic realm and how demons interact with us. And so tonight, if you want to start here, you can kind of listen to see what we do. And then you can go back as far back if you want to go into the books, or if you just want to go back a couple of episodes into this content, you'll see that there's a theme for all of these stories. And so without boring you to death, let me just give one more announcement and we'll jump to tonight's story. If you want to reach out to us, you could find us at the Struggle Series Podcast at gmail.com. We'd still love to hear from you. We want to hear your stories. If you need prayer or resources in helping you to deal with demonic activity of your own, we would love to hear that story, as well as just guide you in the right direction. So please reach out to us again at the Struggle Series Podcast at gmail.com. So without further ado, let us get to New Year's resolution. Have you ever decided to make a change in your life? I'm not talking about a half-hearted change. I'm talking about a major decision to completely change course. The reason most people decide to make a change at the beginning of the year is because it reminds us that we can start over. The reason people fail with their New Year's resolution is because true change doesn't wait for a date on a calendar. When we are inspired to change, we must act immediately, or the old habit will dig in deeper. Now, let's hear a story about a man named Ben who had a decision to make a change for the better. Ben sat on his couch alone in his apartment. He had just left his parents' house after celebrating Christmas. It was a great day. The day went so well that it inspired him to take a long, hard look at his life. He was reflecting on how his life was not on a good path, and it was time to make a change. Ben was 27 years old. And up to this point, he was content with his party lifestyle. He had a good job, but he was stagnant. There was no way he was going to be promoted if he was always late to work and hung over most of the time. He had plenty of encounters with the ladies, but he had no long term relationships. This was on purpose. As he sat on the couch, he realized he was lonely. He realized that he wanted what his parents had. They had each other. They had made a life together. They were ready to celebrate 35 years of marriage, and they were just as happy as they had ever been. Ben realized that if he wanted to have something like that, he better make a change. In that moment, he decided that the party life was over. He was going to clean up his act. He said to himself, I'm not waiting for New Year's. This change starts today. That night, Ben made a decision to go back to church, stop going to the bars, and to become the man that his parents always wanted him to be, the man he wanted to be. That night, Ben had horrible nightmares. He would wake up from one nightmare, fall asleep, only to be thrust into the next nightmare. He woke up about 10 in the morning feeling like he had barely slept. It was a Friday, and he did not have to work. He made himself some breakfast and decided to flip on the TV and search for a church service on YouTube. He stumbled upon a pastor that seemed to be Ben's type of guy. He was a real guy who spoke plainly and got right to the point. He had a sermon posted that was exactly what Ben needed. It was a sermon on rededicating your life back to Jesus. As Ben listened, he was drawn in. The pastor spoke of leaving the party lifestyle and finding fulfillment in Jesus. That is what Ben had been meditating on the night before. Then the pastor said something that caught his attention. The pastor said, when you try to make your way back to Jesus, the demons who have been influencing you are not going to like it. They will come for you. You have to stay in prayer because they will not want to let you go. Ben thought to himself, maybe that's why I'm having those demonic nightmares. Ben bowed his head and prayed at the conclusion of the service and found himself sobbing as he rededicated his life to Jesus. He had never felt more alive. By the end of the morning, he felt like the next year of his life would be the best ever. Ben decided to head out to do some shopping. He felt like he was walking on air. He went into a local clothing store with the intention of renewing his wardrobe. He wanted to walk into the office on Monday looking sharp. He wanted to let his supervisors know that he was a new man and was hoping that with some hard work, he could start moving up the ladder. He was browsing in the men's section when a beautiful young woman approached him and asked him if he needed help. Normally, Ben would have declined any assistance. In this case, he did need help. He asked her, "Do you work on commission?" She nodded yes. He then said, "Well, let's make you some money today. I'm here to redo my entire work wardrobe." She smiled and said, "That sounds great. Not just for the extra money. It sounds fun. I can't wait." The two spent the next 3 hours trying on every business casual outfit in the store. Ben was even willing to try on clothing that he would never consider in the past. He was in the best mood, and he was having fun with Alice. Alice was a 25-year-old woman who was single, but definitely looking. When she first saw Ben, her heart didn't race. She just saw him as a customer. Once she spent time with him, she saw just how attractive he was. He was moderately handsome, but he had charisma. There was also something about him. It was a light. She wanted to feed on it. When Ben saw Alice, he didn't really consider her either. She was definitely not the type of woman that he would normally date. The more time they spent together, the more he noticed her. They seemed to connect in a way that was deeper than he had allowed in the past. At the register, Alice was worried about Ben's reaction about the price. She had been keeping a rough calculation in her head. It would be about $2,500. She smiled when it came up to $2,450. She smiled even bigger when Ben did not flinch. He said, "That's not bad considering that I got a whole new wardrobe." As he tapped his credit card, there was an awkward silence. It seemed like such a good time should not end. Before Ben could put his finger on this uncomfortable moment, Alice said, "This may be a little unconventional, but what do you think about having some dinner sometime? I've enjoyed our time together, and I would like to get to know you better." Ben was taken aback by the invitation, but he was also excited. He said, "I've had a good time today. I don't think it would hurt to have some dinner. When are you available?" She said, "How about tomorrow night? There's a really nice steak place about 5 doors down from here. It will be my treat since you hooked me up with all this commission." Ben said, "How about tomorrow night at 6:30 and I will buy. I'm kind of a traditional guy. I can't have you buying me dinner. I hope that's okay." She replied, "I don't mind you being traditional. I will gladly accept and meet you there about 6:30. I'm kind of a traditional girl myself. Since we don't really know each other, I have a rule that I will meet you at the restaurant." Ben thanked her and they swapped phone numbers. Ben did not see that she slipped something into one of his bags. He would not notice until he got home. He assumed that it was just a small clump of somebody's hair in a bow that must have come off in the dressing room. That night, Ben sat in his living room eating a pizza that he had had delivered. He watched some TV and scrolled social media. He decided to cyberstalk Alice to see if he could find out a little about her. She seemed to be a fairly normal woman. She had pictures of friends and family posted. Ben noticed one photo that drew his attention. He saw a picture that appeared to be Alice at a holiday dinner with her parents. There was something about the look on her father's face that was unsettling. He wasn't sure if it was, in fact, her father, but if it was, he looked at Alice with disdain. Ben then saw a picture of Alice with a group of girlfriends in the woods. It appeared to be a camping trip because he could see a fire in the center of the women. They appeared to be dancing. Ben thought, "I'm not really a camper, but I guess I could give it a try. She seems to be into it." He contemplated how he could bring it up on their date without letting on that he was stalking her. Just then, he felt a chill come over the room. This caught Ben's attention because he could hear the furnace running. Why was it so cold? It was as if someone had opened the door and let in the winter air. It felt as if the air was coming down the hall from the kitchen. He stared down the hall and was just about to get up and go check to see if he had left a window open. Every hair on his body stood on end. He felt a presence that can only be described as evil. As he stared into the darkness, his eyes tried to focus. He couldn't say for sure, but he thought he saw a figure standing in the kitchen. It seemed like there was a shape that was darker than the dark. He sat frozen as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. As he squinted his eyes, he got the confirmation that he needed. Forming out of the darkness was a pair of glowing red eyes. It was as if the being had its eyes closed and then decided to open them. Ben gasped and stumbled as he tried to stand up. That is when he heard the footsteps start to run down the hall. His heart raced as he tried to decide which way to run. Before he could move, a black figure seemed to envelop him. He screamed as he woke up on the couch. He looked around the room to see the light peeking through the blinds. He was breathing so hard, he thought he may have a heart attack. He said to himself, "That dream seems so real. I don't even remember falling asleep. These dreams are getting ridiculous." But something in the back of his mind knew that it wasn't a dream. Ben turned on his computer and found a video from the pastor he had watched the day before. He put on a sermon, but before he knew it, the video was over. He felt frustrated that he had become so distracted, he didn't even remember what the preacher had said. He said a little prayer in his head. "God, please don't let me lose my momentum. I want to be closer to you." Just then, he got a notification on his phone. It was a text from Alice sharing that she was excited. Ben began to think about his date with Alice. He wasn't sure if he was ready to date. After all, he wanted to focus on being the best version of himself. But he had enjoyed his time with her. He thought, what does it hurt to go see if she's all that she seems to be? The two seemed to continue right where they left off. They laughed and seemed to share the same witty sense of humor. Ben felt comfortable enough to share that he had stalked her on social media. He said, "So I saw some pics of you out in the woods. Are you some sort of outdoors woman?" She said, "I don't mind it. It's not my favorite thing to do. I just have a group of friends that like to go out there and howl at the moon." "What are you, like a werewolf?" "No, we just like to go out and do witchy stuff." "What do you mean witchy stuff?" "I belong to a coven of white witches. Don't worry, we're not out cursing people and doing spells in a big cauldron with the eye of a frog or something like that." Ben's demeanor instantly shifted. He tried to change the subject because he knew that this ride was coming to an end. He had just rededicated his life to Jesus, and he was aware of God's position on witches. He had also remembered a part of the sermon he had listened to earlier where the pastor had talked about witches. He said to himself, "No wonder I was distracted. I was supposed to hear that message." Alice seemed to catch the shift in Ben. She frustratingly said, "So I assume that the whole witch thing bothers you." He said, "I'm not one of those guys that will ever tell somebody what to do with their life. With that being said, I am a Christian, and it just doesn't line up with my beliefs. I mean no disrespect, but my faith is important to me. I've recently made a commitment to God to follow His precepts for my life. Does that make sense?" She laughed and said, "I didn't peg you for one of those 'I'm better than everyone else' Christians." "Whoa, I never said I was better than anybody. As a matter of fact, I think I was very respectful. I didn't mean to offend you, but on the same token, I will not apologize for my faith. I think the problem is that you're closed-minded. I'm not a dark witch, Ben. I'm a white witch. Do you know the difference?" "I actually don't, but I do know that God considers it all the same." "It seems like you're trying to sway me, so why don't I ask you a question? What are your thoughts on faith, religion, and Christianity?" "Honestly, I hate it. No matter what religion it is, witches are persecuted. I don't know why I should respect any of them when they burned us at the stake." "Well, hopefully you see that I am not persecuting you. As a matter of fact, I don't think any less of you. I'm just dedicated to my faith and would like to find someone who shares that faith. That doesn't mean I'm against you. Compatibility is a big deal to me. That compatibility must include a shared faith." "Oh, dear Ben, you don't understand how elitist that sounds, but don't worry. I've already claimed you. You will not escape my spell." He wasn't sure if she was joking or if she was serious. What he was certain of is that he did not believe in the whole white witch thing. This woman had a dark side to her. He didn't see it earlier, but he could see it now. She seemed to have an extreme confidence in her status as a witch. She also seemed to have a look in her eye that was not positive. The next few minutes went as poorly as you can imagine. The food showed up, and he had barely cut into his steak when she said, "You know I wasn't kidding, Ben. I claimed you as my own. You will see how powerful my spells can be." She was not being humorous. She was dead serious. He said, "Well, I am very uncomfortable with that. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and end this date. I appreciate your time, but this is where I draw the line. Please enjoy your dinner. I'll find the waiter and take care of the bill. I wish you well in life, Alice. Good night." Alice laughed a sinister laugh as she looked deep into Ben's eyes. She said, "I can promise you one thing. You will regret humiliating me in this restaurant, Ben. You will regret it." Ben called his parents on the way home. He told them all about the interaction and how he had stood up for his faith. His mother did voice her pride in his actions, but warned him that witches are a real thing and that he should be in constant prayer. She said, "Demons will come for you, Ben. Please be careful and start going to church." After Ben hung up the phone, he thought about the nightmares he had experienced. He also thought about the attack from a shadowy entity that he wasn't sure was a dream. He wondered if it was real. He had left the restaurant thinking that he had just dodged a relationship with a crazy woman. Now, he was concerned for his spiritual health. When he arrived at home, he almost fell to his knees. His entire apartment had been ransacked. He was speechless. His first thought was that it was Alice. That was an obvious suspect. However, how could she have beaten him home? He went straight from the restaurant without diversion. She was still eating when he walked out the door. She wouldn't have had time to beat him home, break in, trash the place, and leave before he got there. He called the police and they came out fairly quickly. They checked the locks and windows, but there were no obvious signs of forced entry. The officer asked if anyone else had keys. Ben stated that only his parents had the spare keys, but he had been on the phone with them. The only other person he could think of was property management. One officer went down to the office and spoke with them. They still had the spare key in the safe, and they had not seen anything suspicious. The police told him to have the locks changed and maybe stay somewhere else until the office could have maintenance secure his apartment. Ben thanked them for their time, but did not heed their advice. He locked the doors and decided to start the cleanup. As he had told the police, there was nothing missing. This was simply vandalism. As he put everything back in its place, his mind raced. Who could have done this? He couldn't help but think of Alice and her warning. Why hadn't he told the police about her? He knew that she could not have made it to his place, break in, toss his place, and then leave without forcing entry. But could she have had someone else do it? It didn't seem likely. She couldn't have known that the date would go south and have someone on speed dial to damage his home if it did go bad. Plus, Ben was 90% sure she had no idea where he lived. Maybe the store she worked at had his address. This was concerning, but it just didn't seem likely. As Ben finished up his project, his mind settled on the only logical culprit of this vandalism. Was this the shadow entity that had attacked him the previous night? If the attack was real, then he had no doubt that this entity could destroy his apartment. Ben went to bed that night and, of course, had nightmares that were not only terrifying, they felt real. Ben woke up later than he normally did. He was still so tired. His sleep was interrupted several times. He wandered into the bathroom and stared into the mirror. He immediately noticed a mark on his neck. He leaned in closer to stare at the mark. When it finally clicked, he had to grab the counter so he wouldn't collapse on the floor. It was a bite mark. How could this be? How could he have went to bed with no bite mark and woken up with one? This did not make sense. He felt something break in him. He knew two things. One, this was definitely paranormal activity. Two, no one would believe him. Ben spent the next few days talking to his parents and friends about the paranormal activity in his apartment. As he suspected, they were all skeptical. He felt hopeless. His mother, who seemed to believe him more than all others, suggested that he contact a clergy member or a paranormal team. Ben was able to track down a demonologist who was willing to come to his apartment and sit with him. Ben felt a glimmer of hope. The day the demonologist showed up, the paranormal activity was at an all-time high. The demonologist hadn't even been there for 10 minutes when he saw a shadow entity move quickly down the hallway. He got up to investigate. Ben sat on the couch and waited for him to return to the living room. The demonologist came back to the room with a look of pure terror on his face. Ben's heart stopped beating as he waited for him to talk. The man finally spoke and said, "Did you have an interaction with the witch?" Ben said, "How did you know that?" "The demon told me. It said that he was sent to destroy you. It also told me that you would die by the end of the day." Ben nervously chuckled and said, "Wait, what?" "This is a very powerful demon, Ben. I did not challenge it. I am going to need my team here. We have to do this as soon as possible. I think it would be a good idea to have someone come and stay with you and keep an eye on you until we can come back tonight." Ben sat speechless. He watched the demonologist make some calls and all but beg his team to cancel their plans. Finally, he hung up the last call and said, "We will be back at 6 p.m. I want you to call someone and have them come here. I'm not going to leave until they get here." Ben made a quick phone call to the one person who he knew would be there for him, no matter what. Soon, his friend Michael showed up. Michael, who had been skeptical when he had first heard Ben's story, seemed a little more convinced when he saw the look on the demonologist's face. Ben and Michael sat and talked about every detail so that Michael was aware of the circumstances. Michael could see the extreme concern on Ben as he told the story. Ben obviously believed that the entity was capable of harming him. Michael said, "What about your faith? Aren't you a Christian? Won't God protect you?" The demonologist said that I've opened a door and that we need to close it. He said that we will turn to Jesus and he will help us to close out this demon. But he also said that this demon is very powerful and that he believes it will try and harm me. Michael and Ben talked about faith and fear. Their conversation was getting to Michael, who was not a Christian. He said, "Ben, this is scaring the hell out of me. Maybe I need to turn my life over to Jesus. When I walked in here, I wasn't sure if I believed any of this. After talking and seeing shadows run all over your place, I know this is real. I have to go to the bathroom, but when I get back, can you tell me how to become a Christian?" Ben, of course, agreed. This was a pleasant distraction to his current circumstances. Michael went to the bathroom and made his way over to the sink to wash his hands. As he stared at himself in the mirror, he started to feel the room spin. He couldn't focus his eyes. He thought that he might faint. He dropped to the floor and his mind flooded with the many years of partying and womanizing that he had participated in. He had vivid flashbacks of scenes from his life where he was partaking in deviant behavior. Then he felt like he was being electrocuted. He wasn't sure how long he had been on the floor, but when he woke up, he went back to the sink to splash water on his face. He looked into the mirror and immediately saw that something was wrong with his eyes. He was not looking at himself. The demon told Michael,
"You belong to me. Now you know what I need you to do."
The demon in Michael opened up the drawer and grabbed a pair of scissors. He then opened the door and made his way to the living room. Ben shouted, "Man, you were in there forever. Are we going to pray or what?" When Ben saw the scissors, it was too late. At 6 p.m. sharp, the demonologist and his team walked up the stairs to the apartment. When he knocked on the door, it opened up. It wasn't even latched. He went in, announcing their arrival. When they rounded the corner into the living room, they found a deceased Ben. There was so much blood that they didn't even check his pulse. They called the police immediately. 2 hours later, Michael was arrested at his home. They found him sitting on his porch, covered in blood, holding a pair of scissors. When they approached him, he seemed to snap out of his trance. He denied any knowledge of what had happened. In reality, he did not know what happened, but he would be held accountable. So there you have it. That story is entitled New Year's Resolution. Now let's jump into kind of some behind the scenes theology of that story. For those of you who know me fairly well, you know that I push the boundaries to make you think about your theology of demons and how they interact with Christians and when God would intervene and when he wouldn't. And so in this story, I think one of the obvious questions, definitely at the end of the story, is would God allow a man who was ready to accept him into his life to be overtaken by a demon and become an instrument of evil? And I'm going to let that set with you. I'm going to let you take that question into your own studies. I think a lot of times we get caught as Christians in the concept of if somebody is a Christian, can they actually be possessed by a demon or have a demon? And see, we get caught up in this terminology. Over the years, people have asked me that question, I don't know, hundreds of times. And my answer is probably more diplomatic, maybe, but definitely more real than just answering it with a basic theology response. You see, my answer is always I don't know 100% for sure if a Christian can be possessed by a demon, but I do know that Christians can be influenced, oppressed, and driven by a demon. I like the word attachment because even if you don't believe that a Christian can be actually possessed by a demon, Christians have attachments all the time. As a matter of fact, I would say that Christians off and on have attachments throughout their life because demons are out to get you. You've now become a true enemy because you're now a child of God. And especially if you are somebody who is effective for the kingdom. So I heard somebody say this the other day, and I wish I can remember who to give them credit, but I was watching a video or something, and they said something to the effect of if a Christian doesn't have struggles in their life, or a minister or deliverance minister doesn't have struggles in their life, I wonder if they're even really what they say they are. And I know the question or the statement is very black and white, but I think there's a truth to that. I think most of us who have tried to serve God in some capacity would agree that the demons came for us harder then than when we were either not a Christian or when we were stagnant as a Christian. It's almost like, why would they spend their time on us if we're ineffective? But once we become effective to the cause of Christ and by default against their cause, that's when they would focus their time, energy, and attention on us, right? And so in this story, you see a man who's decided to dedicate his life to God. And maybe, makes you also question whether God would have allowed him more time to, draw closer as he had made this decision, because it wasn't but a couple of days, a week or so, and he is deceased at the hands of an evil entity from one simple encounter with a person who was domineering, maybe controlling. I don't know what term psychology would want to use, but this person was evil and didn't get their way and had the power to summon demons to harm people. And I'm going to tell you this, whether you choose to believe it or not. I have seen many cases where people have the ability to summon demons for nefarious purposes. I've seen it multiple times, and I've experienced it in my life as people come for me. And I would go as far as to say that it's not just witches and warlocks and occultists that can do this. Sometimes people's intentions can also, uh, you know, summon a demon or empower a demon to come after us. When we carry things like revenge in our hearts or animosity or disdain for another person, the entities that are attached to us can be empowered to, maybe go out and harm the person that we haven't forgiven, which is why forgiveness is such an important part of our walk with God. It's that one part where demons, I think, have a pretty easy door to walk through because forgiveness is hard. And the world would tell you that forgiving somebody who's harmed you is not only not realistic, but it maybe would make you weak or something like that. We think that in those moments. But it's those doors that allow demons to attach to us, to come into our lives, and to not only destroy us, but maybe destroy the people around us. I think the final moral to this story that I would have you know is that be careful who you interact with. And I think I've said this recently I've even watched a handful of videos lately where people are starting to understand that witches will actually move into a church and try to destroy it from the inside out. They can pretend to be Christian. They could pretend and even truly know the lingo and the concepts in order for you to believe that they're the good guys, right? They might join a small group or join a singles ministry and start dating vulnerable men or women or whatever the case may be. So be careful who you interact with. I think there's a lesson that, when we're truly focused on God and we're listening to his voice and we're truly trusting our next steps to him, before we date somebody, before we choose to enter into any sort of relationship with depth, maybe we should ask God, is this for me? Is this person for me? Is this relationship would something you would want for me at this point in my life? And then listen to the Holy Spirit. Because left to our own devices, we'll follow things like lust and attraction and, drop our guard a little bit and find ourselves in the midst of somebody who wants to control us or even lure us away from God. And when we choose to set a boundary or put our feet down, we may have already opened a door that is very hard to close. So I'll leave you with that. But I want to thank you for tuning in. As we have told you before, we're going to try to pump out a couple of these stories a month. And so we ask that you just continue to listen and continue to give this podcast a chance. Remember that this podcast is written and produced by me, Anthony Corelli. This program is copyright The Struggle, LLC. If you want to find out more about us, you can go to our website, thestruggleseries.com. And if you want to reach out to us, it's the Struggle Series Podcast at gmail.com. I want to again wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's. Thank you for tuning in, and may God bless you and bring you peace.
Thank you for listening to the Struggle Series Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and tell a friend. We will see you next time.